Well, I started quite young playing the alto saxophone. I was never very good, but I switched to the baritone when I was in junior high school, and it I took to it very quickly. And as a result of that, many opportunities opened up for me. For one thing, my first influence, I would have to say, was Jerry Mulligan, because he was the best-known baritone player. And then I got scholarships to music camps, and I got to spend 3 summers with Phil Woods, the great jazz alto player, and he, I would say, was one of the real first inspirations to me. Very inspiring, and I had good teachers, all throughout. And at that camp, I met Mike Brecker. We went to the camp together, and of course, he was one of the great influences and inspirations to me. And the first time I heard John Coltrane, I would have to say everything changed. Because for me, John Coltrane was, and I would have to say still is, the biggest influence for me as a musician. He's, how can I put it this way? He's an artist. He's a guy who combined spirituality with music. And you can follow his career as a young man. And if you're listening to Coltrane and you don't know him, and you listen to his first records and his last records, you have no idea it's the same person. I've never seen a development like that in my life. And I would have to say he was the biggest influence for me as a musician coming up. I would say after Charlie Parker. I think Charlie Parker, there were certain people who did it. I guess Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker, and I would say for me, John Coltrane was, would be in that order. But I want to say something about A Love Supreme. I don't know, he must have been experimenting and thinking about spirituality and religious matters for a long time. But this, I think, was his first real expression, through music. And that, the opening theme of A Love Supreme, it's a collection of fourths, ba ba da da ba ba da ba da be da, etc. And some years later, it's a very interesting story. My wife and I were at a synagogue. The synagogue we attended for the high holiday services, and one of the themes for Yom Kippur was almost exactly that melody. Of course, with a little different rhythm and stuff. And I started thinking about it, and not that he copied it or anything, but there was something about that theme that had some kind of spiritual significance. And I would say that before, when you referred to me as an artist, I think of myself as a musician. I think of John Coltrane as an artist. I think of music, not to offend anyone, but perhaps being possibly the highest art form, for the reason that it deals with vibrations. And, we know from physics and stuff that this whole universe is made up of various kinds of vibrations. There are things we can't hear, there are things we can't see. So in a way, music has the possibility of connecting with some kind of higher spiritual thing, be it God or be it whatever you want to refer to it. And that's one of the things I love about John Coltrane. When I see him playing, or when I listen to him playing, I got to see him once, which was pretty amazing, but it's almost like he's praying. And I've never seen any other musician like that before, but he's he's reaching for something. And I always found, it's kind of sustained me, I guess, over the years. It's a state I would like to get to. I don't consider myself an artist. I consider myself a musician. I think artists might be a little higher than I would say that I'm at. I think musicians like Miles Davis are artists. Musicians like Duke Ellington or John Coltrane. I consider Mike Brecker an artist because he reached this level that was just beyond his technical playing. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Us about that experience.
Yeah. It's interesting because when that's happening, and unfortunately it doesn't happen enough, but when it is happening, you're really in the present moment and you kind of feel like you could do anything. It's like a very powerful feeling. And you, in some ways, you feel like you're an audience member looking at yourself. And it's almost like a drug, I think, when you're doing it. Because everything is coming out and it's just working. And it's a glorious feeling when that's happening. The thing is, though, you can have it one night, and if you try to recreate it the next night, you say, well, those thematic ideas work, I'm going to try that again. It almost never works. It's like, and you don't know when it's going to work. Like a great musician like Sonny Rollins. If you've ever gone to see Sonny, he'll take long solos, and sometimes it sounds like he's meandering, but it's almost like he's just waiting for that lightning bolt to hit him, where he's in the present moment and this great music comes out, where it's speaking through him as opposed to that he's actually doing it. So that's what I would have to say about that. It's an interesting question because I don't necessarily think of myself as being essential. I think that all in all, I think that music can bring people together. It can bring people from different kinds of backgrounds together, especially when people aren't bringing in their political opinions and stuff like that. I think that's really important. I think that I've read studies recently. They say the kids that learn music, it does something very positive for their brain. I guess I don't have that much more profound things to say about that. I mean, it was certainly essential for me. I'll tell you that, because when I grew up, when I was a kid, I don't know if this fits into everything, but I'm going to say it. I was an overweight kid. I wasn't great at sports. And, when I started playing music, my life changed. I mean, I came into contact with people who appreciated what I did. It really substantially helped my self-image, I must say, especially since in many of the places that I was kind of up there at a high level. And I met people from different art forms. And it was a major thing in helping build my self-image. But at the same time, that can also be dangerous when you get older, because if you base so much of your self-image on how well you're playing on a given day, you can go through long periods where you're pretty depressed because it's not always going to work great. So as a matter of fact, one of the reasons I never got heavily into teaching was because I felt if I was going through one of those periods, I would think like, what business do I have of telling anyone what to do if I don't feel that I can do it myself. But I would say that playing music and jazz from a young age, it brought me into contact with all different kinds of people, all different kinds of cultures. It was really important for my self-development, I mean, as a human being, because I came to know people that I might not have come to know and realize, we're people. Doesn't matter what your religion is, what your race is, we love this music and we're playing together. And I think it helped me to become more sensitive more sensitive as a human being to, the human condition. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe playing music or whatever it is that your particular art form is helps you to become more sensitive to humanity and the world in general. Well, I played a lot of instruments over my lifetime. I'm affectionately referred to as a doubler, a woodwind doubler. And so I've had to, spend a lot of time on instruments like the flute and the clarinet and the bass clarinet, as well as the saxophone, the bassoon. So recently, I've always loved the bass clarinet, but I never personally felt that I could improvise on it like I can on the saxophone. It's a difficult instrument, and because I didn't start out on clarinet, there are different fingerings involved. There's a whole set of different circumstances involved, but I always loved the instrument. I've done numerous recordings where I played solos on it, but I always, I would spend a lot of time preparing for that particular project. So, as a matter of fact, just last week, I'm saying to myself, well, I'm getting older. The baritone is a heavy instrument. It's hard for me to carry it around and stuff. I want to take my bass clarinet and I'm going to concentrate on this for the next year or so. That doesn't mean I'm not going to play my baritone because it's part of what I do. But I've done it so much, I just have this desire to work with the bass clarinet. So the last week, I've been spending a lot of time just practicing it. And some interesting things happen, So first, I'm thinking about, I'm going to play through some classical etudes. And that's going okay, but it's not really what I want to particularly do. What I want to do is take this instrument and find out how I can play music on that instrument that's not the same as the music that I'm going to play on the saxophone. And what that requires is really a lot of time and practice to get to that point where I don't have to think about it so much when I'm playing. So instead of trying to play through etudes and stuff, I just pick something. Maybe I want to work on these scales today, or maybe I want to work on this kind of thing. And I just spent a lot of time going over it slowly, quickly, with a tuner, without a tuner. And then another idea pops in my head. And I said, I'm going to work on that idea. And then I'm going to work on that idea. And before you know it, 3 or 4 hours has gone by. And I think, so my approach then is not look at an etude, but to just work on whatever comes in my mind at a particular time and just do it. And not, worry about those other kinds of things. And hopefully through doing that, I will find something in that instrument that I wouldn't be able to play on the saxophone. That would just be, this is a bass clarinet being played. And this music really can only be played on the bass clarinet. Because after all, jazz is a language. And we play a lot of the same language on whatever instrument that it is that we're playing. But also, each instrument does have its own kind of personality. And you want to try to find, I mean, what works on the saxophone might not work on something else. There's a great solo that the trumpeter Freddie Hubbard does on a song called Stolen Moments on an Oliver Nelson record. And it's incredible. And I listened to that solo, but you know something? I don't think it would work as well on the saxophone if you transcribed it and played it on the saxophone. It works great on the trumpet, but I don't know if it would work that well on the saxophone. There's certainly plenty of saxophonistic kind of techniques that don't work on other instruments. And I guess so what I'm looking for now is to take this instrument and try to find that kind of comfort with it. Try to find a way to play it where some original music can come out of that instrument that can just basically be played on that instrument. And I think it's going to require me to not spend time on the other instruments for a while, just to like concentrate on that thing day after day, and hopefully something interesting will come up. I know it already feels better playing it, I will say that. Certain problems that I was having with this particular instrument seem to be clearing up, which is, that's a nice feeling. But let's see what happens. Let's see if I can keep it up. Another interesting thing that I found, I have 2 bass clarinets. Some years ago, bass clarinet's always been an instrument that's been very tricky with intonation. A few years ago, the Selmer company came out with a newer model bass clarinet, and some of the others have as well, where they've fixed many of the pitch issues. So I got myself that particular instrument, and a few years later I acquired this other one, which is an older bass clarinet. And the interesting thing that I found is, yes, while they've improved the pitch on a lot of these, on the bass clarinets, they've lost a lot of the personality on the instrument. That there's something about, especially for a jazz player, because the critical pitch, it's not the same thing. The pitch is not quite as critical. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of classical artists, soloists that play with, what would the word be? It's a different kind of pitch when they're playing solos and stuff like that, as opposed to when they're trying to blend in a section. And of course, as a jazz artist, you're soloing all the time, pretty much. So you might want to be using that kind of a situation. So I think that the older instrument actually has a lot more personality than the newer instrument, which plays way better in tune. And you know, for most of the commercial kind of work that you would want to do, that's the instrument you would play. Especially when everyone else has one of those instruments. Before, it didn't matter so much because people were used to hearing what was coming at them. But the interesting thing is that after playing this instrument 4 or 5 days of 4 hours practicing a day, and I sit in front of the tuner, the pitch is not as bad as I thought it was. It's just something about playing it and feeling how your body responds to it and how the air goes into the instrument, what you have to do with your larynx and what you have to do with your throat and those kind of things, and how it responds to what you're hearing, that it gets more in line with that, yet it still has way more personality than the other instrument. Essentially, music is a sound. If, I might be taking this a little bit out, but if you've ever read the Bible, it kind of opens up with something to the effect of God with the word or the sound created the universe. So it's not so much the word, but the sound of the word that, you know, carries the vibrations and stuff. So when you're listening to the word has a certain meaning. But if you listen to music and don't try to criticize it, don't try to think about it, but just let it happen, that's could have a very transformative kind of situation in a way that maybe reading a book doesn't, or looking at something doesn't. But that when you're listening to music, you're listening to something that's higher than language, and not to offend other art forms, but maybe because of what it is, because it's so much a part of what the universe is that it would be very valuable to take this back to your planet. So.